How much for this? Liam Carter heard his own voice before he felt the weight in his hands lighten. The old violin case slid onto the glass counter, its dark leather scuffed at the corners, brass latches dulled by time and touch. Outside, rain hammered the awning like 1,000 drumsticks, and the neon pawn and loan sign blinked in a weary rhythm, red, then blue-red, then blue, as if the whole block needed CPR. Mr. Russo, who had run this pawn shop for 3 decades on the edge of Midtown, lifted a brow without lifting his chin. He had a way of looking at a thing and a person at the same time. Depends on what it is. Depends on what you need, he said, voice hoarse with coffee and city air. He undid the latches and opened the case with a care that betrayed respect for anything that could make music. The shop smelled of metal and old varnish winter coats dried too close to a heater coins and stories. Liam pressed his palms to the counter to stop the faint tremor. It wasn't fear, exactly. It was the body's way of measuring what the heart had already decided. Rent due Friday, gas bill overdue, lunch account at June's school running low, 12 extra hours mopping marble hallways at the Manhattan Conservatory of Music, and still he was counting quarters. The case had grown heavier the last few blocks, even though it weighed the same as always, half memories, half wood. Russo lifted the violin by the neck the way a nurse lifts a newborn, steady, purposeful. He tilted it to catch the light. "Not bad," he murmured. "Seen better, seen worse." He tapped a fingernail near the bridge. "It's got years in it. Years are good for sound, not always for price." "I'm just pawning, not selling," Liam said. "Short term." He kept his voice even and low the way he spoke when a professor left coffee rings on a Steinway and blamed the janitor. "I'll redeem it." 30 days plus interest, Russo said as if reading from a catechism that would outlive them both. Liam dug out his wallet. The plastic was cracked at the edge like the window in his kitchen that he hadn't gotten around to fixing, like everything that had taken one too many winters. He passed over his driver's license and waited while the old man peered from photo to face as if faces could be forged but eyes told the truth. Rain swelled, then sagged. Through the shop's fogged window, a black SUV pulled up to the curb tires hissing against the streaming gutter. The back door opened and a woman stepped out beneath a large black umbrella held by someone else, an assistant probably. She moved with purpose, her heels precise, her dark coat calibrated to the rain. The assistant checked a list on his phone, glanced at the shop's neon sign, and held the door open for her. Amelia Drake had been in pawn shops before, quietly, discreetly. Not to buy diamonds or gold, but to chase ghosts. Her late mother, a violinist who had died too young, had once owned a custom instrument lost to the shuffle of years. For reasons even Amelia didn't admit to anyone, she sometimes visited small shops across the city, searching shelves and counters, hoping that one day a familiar curve of wood or a scar in the varnish might appear. The bell chimed as she entered, a fragile, cheerful sound that had the bad timing to exist at all. Russo glanced up. "Ms. Drake," he said with the mild surprise of a man who has seen everything but still keeps a drawer for miracles. "Didn't expect you here." "I don't usually announce it," Amelia replied, brushing rain from her coat. Her eyes adjusted quickly to the dim, and then they found Liam and the violin in Russo's hands. Observation stacked in her gaze janitor's uniform beneath a dark jacket, shoes with a polish that came from diligence rather than money, the roughness at the knuckles of someone who lifts more than his share. Her eyes flicked to the velvet cradle inside the case, the faded fabric the instrument balanced like a wounded bird. Something in her face sharpened, though she disguised it with a smile that wasn't kind. "Some things you don't expect to see," she said. "And yet, here we are." Liam felt the heat crawl up his neck. He straightened by instinct. "I'm pawning," he said to no one in particular, to the air that had become thinner. Amelia stepped closer, the heels of her boots soft on the worn rug. "You work at the conservatory," she said. "I've seen you in the hallways." "Yes, ma'am," Liam answered, because that was how you replied to people who could change your life and never know it. Maintenance. He didn't say janitor. He didn't need to. Maintenance, she repeated like a note tested for pitch rather than melody. Her gaze returned to the violin, then to his face. And now you're here to trade music for cash." Her lips curved precise. "Classy. Ms." Drake Russo said gently as if easing a bow across a string's first note. "I don't pry into why a man's here. The city brings folks to my counter for all reasons. Of course," she said, the smile cooling. "Everyone has reasons." Her attention landed on Liam again, a wait and a verdict. "It's always a pity to see beauty sold by people who don't understand it." She nodded to the violin. "But what do I know?" Something inside Liam wanted to push back to say that beauty had lived on his kitchen table and fallen asleep in his daughter's hands, that a little girl's practice scales could sound like hope if you listened right. Instead, he swallowed. His boss's email, "Be discreet," ran through his head like a rule written in permanent marker. He pictured June, 9 years old, with her blue ribbon and her whispered counting under her breath. He pictured the red notice on his door flapping. He pictured the way the city looked at men who failed and found a story to tell about it. "I'll redeem it," he said, not to Amelia, but to the old shop and the neon sign and the rain that kept time on the awning. 30 days is enough." Amelia's assistant shifted, cleared his throat. "We should go," he murmured. "You have the luncheon. In a moment." Amelia folded her arms loosely as if cold and reluctance were the same thing. Her gaze pinned the violin. "What's special about it?" she asked Russo, not hiding the question from Liam. Russo turned it in his hands, squinting at the varnish, tapping an edge. "It's got a voice," he said. "Not one of your shiny new things. Not boutique. It's been played more than praised. That matters." "How much?" Amelia asked. For a pawn, Russo named a number that paid bills, but not dreams. He slid the ticket pad closer, pen poised. "You'll want to know the terms." Liam nodded. He took the ticket when it came a thin rectangle of printer paper that weighed like a promise. Due date stamped at the bottom. He slid it into his wallet behind a photo. June at 7, chin lifted, holding up a finger-painted heart the size of her chest. He closed the wallet slowly, as if sound could shatter anything still intact. "Don't forget," Amelia said, her voice cool enough to frost glass. "Things pawned have a way of staying gone." He met her eyes, then really met them, and for a breath something passed between them, recognition or defiance or a hum he couldn't name. "Not this," he said quietly. "Not if I can help it." If his calm irritated her, she didn't show it. She turned toward the door with a small nod to Russo. The bell chimed again as she left her assistant opening the umbrella, the rain swallowing them back without a ripple. Russo set the violin down with a sigh heavier than the wood deserved. "You okay, kid?" Liam almost laughed at the word kid. He was 38 and had lived a century since the day the sirens spun red along the highway and his world split cleanly into before and after. "I'm fine," he said. He wasn't, but fine was how men survived in cities that didn't care if they fell. He signed what needed signing. Russo slid the case off the glass and down beneath the counter where other things waited for other hands to find their way back. Liam watched the lid disappear, felt the space it left in him. He touched the counter where it had rested the way you touch a pew after prayer, uncertain if anything heard you. 30 days, Russo said again. "Don't be late." "I won't." Liam tucked his collar up against the weather and pushed the door open. The bells sang. The rain met him, cold and honest. He stepped out, felt it soak the cuffs of his pants, the shoulders of his jacket. He didn't mind. He had work tonight. He had floors to make, shine windows to clear, and a daughter to pick up at 4. He had a date with a clock and a city, and the kind of stubborn that keeps men upright. At the curb, the black SUV idled a second before merging into traffic. Through the rain-smeared glass, Amelia Drake looked straight ahead, jaw set, as if deciding something she would not share. Liam watched the taillights shrink and vanish in the blur, then turned toward the subway, his hand on his wallet like a compass. The pawn ticket pressed against the photo of June, paper against paper, promise against love. He walked faster. The rain beat time relentless. In the cadence of the city, he didn't hear the click of heels or the clatter of dishes from the deli next door. He heard scales steady and patient the way June practiced every evening before dinner. He heard her count softly under her breath 1 and 2, and gentle as prayer, strong as a vow. "I'll get it back," he said into the rain so quietly only he could hear. "I promise." By 4 o'clock, the rain thinned to a mist that made the traffic lights look like they were breathing. Liam stood outside PS 115 with a paper cup of coffee warming his palms and watched the parade of backpacks and winter hats spill through the double doors. June appeared in a purple hoodie 2 sizes too big, her hair tied back with the blue ribbon she saved for days that needed luck. She spotted him and ran her sneakers, slapping the wet concrete. "You're early," she said, slipping her hand into his. "Did the conservatory cancel?" "Shift starts later tonight," he said. "Thought we'd cook at home. Pancakes for dinner." "Breakfast for dinner is a power move," June said, solemn as a judge, then grinned. "Can I practice before we cook?" He hesitated for a breath so small it could have been a hiccup. "We'll do our scales," he said. "Nothing stops practice." She didn't notice the almost. 9-year-olds are merciful like that. They took the crosstown bus-fogged windows, turning the city into a watercolor. June peppered him with questions about everything and nothing. Why pigeons bob when they walk, why buses sigh at every stop, why some buildings look like they're smiling, and others look like they're clenching their teeth. "Smiling buildings are rent-controlled," he said, and she laughed because she always did, as if she understood every joke was a way of paying for the next minute. Their apartment was on the 3rd floor of a narrow walk-up with a stairwell that smelled like old mail and lemon cleaner. Inside, the radiator hissed like a cat that had just remembered something it didn't like. June went to the small table by the window and took her practice stance feet, planted, chin lifted, then realized and froze hands hovering where a violin would have been. "We can still do fingerings," Liam said, setting the metronome app on his phone to a gentle tick. "Left hand only. Imagine the string. Hear it before you play it." June nodded, closing her eyes. Her fingers danced in the air, pressing down on nothing and everything the way a bird tests wind. She counted under her breath. 1 and 2 and. Liam stood across from her, tapping time on the table, his own mouth moving in the reflex of a man who had learned to whisper encouragement without interrupting. "Dad," she said after a minute, opening one eye. "Do you think I'll ever get to study there? Like actually inside those rooms? Not cleaning them. I mean," she bit her lip, "I want to make Mom proud. If she were here." Liam kept his gaze steady. "I think," he said, choosing each word like it owed taxes that some doors are waiting for the right knock. "And I think your knock is music." June's mouth softened with that answer that lives somewhere between faith and fact. She resumed her ghost scales, serious as a surgeon. The blue ribbon winked in the late light. He flipped pancakes that came out more oval than round, the only geometry he ever failed, and she drowned hers in syrup and told him about a science experiment with celery and food dye. He listened the way men listen when everything depends on it, with his hands, with the tilt of his head, with the silence he made on purpose so her words had room to spread their wings. "We'll get the violin back." It ran under everything like a bass line. By 7, he left for the conservatory. June handed him a folded drawing at the door, a stick-figure duo standing under a stage light, one tall, one small, both with cartoon bows. At the top she had printed in careful block letters, "Let them hear you." "Put it in your locker," she said. "For luck." "I will," he said, and meant it. Night at the Manhattan Conservatory was a different animal. The marble floors caught reflections like calm water. Hallway sconces pooled light on framed photographs of alumni whose eyebrows never knew rain. Liam changed into the work polo he kept in his locker and clipped his ID to his pocket. He checked the schedule on the corkboard Drake Hall polish handrails spot mop backstage vacuum aisles. Practice rooms wipe down music stands, empty bins. East stairwell sticky step remediation, which was exactly what it sounded like. Diego, who covered mornings and spoke fluent sarcasm, waved as he clocked out. "Big donor's luncheon killed the soap," he said, thumbing toward Drake Hall. "You can ice skate in there." "How was Ms. Drake?" Liam asked lightly, like tossing a pebble into a lake you weren't sure you wanted to swim. "Didn't see her," Diego said, "but her name did. 6 times. 7, if you count the bathroom mirror." He smirked, then sobered. "Hey, I heard rent notices hit the building again." "You good, I'm on time," Liam said. Diego gave him the look friends give when the truth is a closed fist and the best they can offer is a hand on your shoulder. "Call me if you need muscle," he said. "I'll flex my landlord voice." Liam smiled and pushed the cart toward Drake Hall. The door swung open to the hush of a room that could swallow a storm and whisper it back as applause. He had polished these aisles so many times he could see the path of every donor's money. He plugged in the vacuum and worked up and down long straight lines like fresh snow tracks. On stage, a string quartet rehearsed their bows rising and falling like a single creature breathing. He paused at the last row, unreadable longing lifting and lowering in his chest. Near the lobby, a poster board leaned half inside a recycling bin, scuffed bent at the corner. He fished it out. Community Open Day. Youth Talent Showcase. Saturday, 2 p.m. Open to the public. Limited slots. Sign up by Thursday at noon. The conservatory's seal sat at the bottom like a note of approval written by a stern teacher with a soft heart. He checked his phone. Thursday at noon was in 2 days. Slots limited. Liam stood there holding possibility with a coffee stain on it, considering rules and odds and the way time behaved when you were chasing it. He slid the poster behind the cleaning cart's clipboard, a secret he would later call a plan. He finished Drake Hall and moved to the practice rooms. In 3B, a freshman who wore his baseball cap backward tuned a viola until the A stopped wobbling. In 4C, a pianist drilled arpeggios that sounded like someone climbing a staircase without ever reaching the landing. In 5A, a girl worked a passage again and again as if repetition could file the edges off fear. He closed each door softly the way a considerate wind might. In the lobby again, he tilted his head back at the brushed steel letters. The Amelia Drake Recital Hall, and cleaned around their edges with a microfiber cloth. Up on the ladder, he could see his reflection warped in each capital D. He thought of the pawn ticket folded in his wallet and the date stamped like a dare. "Don't fall," a voice said below. Mr. Klein, his supervisor, stood with a clipboard and a look like a metronome measured inevitable. "I won't," Liam said. "Gala next month," Klein said. "Everything needs to shine, no drama. We keep a low profile. Donors like invisible help." "Invisible is my specialty," Liam said quietly. Klein nodded, satisfied, and moved on with the shuffling authority of a man who had survived 3 administrations by never having an opinion louder than the floor buffer. Across town, Amelia Drake set her phone face down on a low table and stared out of the penthouse window. Midtown spread beneath her like a circuit board, lit and humming. The luncheon had ended with a standing ovation for her latest endowment and 3 more people asking if she ever slept. She had smiled in the exact shape required and said the exact words expected. It was a game she had mastered before she could afford to lose. Her assistant, Evan, stood near the kitchen island reading off tomorrow's schedule while a kettle clicked toward boil. 10 a.m., meeting with facilities about the new wing. Noon board finance. 2 site walk with the acoustics consultant. 6 dinner with the chancellor and the Cleveland donor. "Cancel the site walk," she said. Evan blinked. The consultant flew in. "Reschedule," Amelia said, not unkindly. "Send him tickets to the symphony." Evan studied her face for a beat, navigating weather. "Anything else, that will be all she said." When he left, the apartment grew large around her again. She opened the credenza and took out an old vinyl, a recording of her mother at 23 Bow agile as breath. She placed it on the turntable, lowered the needle, and the first track filled the room with a tone that didn't ask permission to be pure. She closed her eyes. A little girl again on a stool, 2 high feet not touching the floor, watching her mother's hands turn wood and string into a kind of honesty. "Play the truth, sweetheart," her mother had said on a winter afternoon when the radiator clanked and the city was an ache. "Notes are ink. Truth is water. The kettle clicked off. She didn't move. The pawn shop had been an errand before the luncheon, a watch for her driver, a last-minute donation of a trumpet to a school in Queens, and yet the image that wouldn't leave was not generosity. It was a man in a work jacket placing a violin on a counter like a heart on a table. Trade music for cash, she had said. Classy. The word clinked unsatisfyingly in memory-cheap jewelry in a velvet box. Why had it bothered her? She had seen worse, hadn't she? Music bought and sold talent, leveraged art, leveraged more. But something in the way the man had said, "I'll redeem it," not defiant, not ashamed, simply fixed, had tested a beam in her. She lifted the needle and let silence re-enter like an old friend. Through the glass, the city flickered. Somewhere below, a siren threaded two lights into one color. She pressed her thumb into her palm until the memory retreated to its cage. Everyone has reasons. She had said that. It was true. It was also lazy. Thursday came faster than some Wednesdays. Liam folded laundry at the kitchen table before dawn while June slept the poster tucked beneath a cereal box like treasure you hide from a thief who might be you. When she woke, he poured milk and slid the poster into the light. Want to read something cool? Her eyes grew. Is this real? Real as sticky stairs, he said. Youth Talent Showcase. Saturday. Open to the public. But we don't have. She stopped herself mid-sentence as if words could bruise. We have fingers, he said. We have time. We have a spot if we get there by noon. June's smile was the kind that starts in the eyes and travels outward the opposite of most smiles in the city. I want to try, she whispered as if volume might break it. Then we'll knock, he said. Let them hear you. They left early to beat the line that might or might not exist. Outside, the conservatory banners from last night's rehearsal fluttered. The students swarmed like purposeful birds. June's hand fit in his. He felt the thrum of something in the air like a stage waiting for the first footstep. Across the street, a black SUV slowed at the light. Liam didn't notice. He was busy with the door, with the day, with the way a father's hope can make even heavy hinges swing. We're full. The woman at the sign-in table didn't look unkind, just finished. A stack of forms leaned against her elbow like a snowdrift. The lobby buzzed with parents' sneakers squeaked on marble, and somewhere a trumpet was practicing scales like a stubborn doorbell. June squeezed Liam's hand, the blue ribbon at the back of her head catching the light. It's the Youth Talent Showcase, Liam said, keeping his voice even. The poster said, sign up by noon. It's noon. On the nose, the woman replied, tapping her watch. We closed the list 2 minutes ago. June stood very still as if sudden movement might break something fragile between them and the room. Liam felt that willingness to plead gather like heat behind his ribs, then another voice chimed in from down the table. Mrs. Halprin said a young man in a conservatory lanyard we had a cancellation at 11. The violin slot. Mrs. Halprin looked up, measuring the world. You sure? Jonah checked his clipboard, nodded. Slot, 19. If they can be ready in 10. Liam bent toward June. Ready in 10. She looked back at him with that brave little nod she used when shots were due at the pediatrician. Ready now. Mrs. Halprin slid a form across. Name June Carter, said June's small voice, large eyes. Teacher of record, Mrs. Halprin asked, pen hovering. June glanced at her dad. Liam forced a half smile. Self-taught, he said. Practice every day. Mrs. Halprin paused, then wrote independent in neat small letters as if the word itself needed to behave. Warm-up rooms are that way, Jonah said, pointing past the glass doors. You'll be in Drake Hall when they call you. Liam and June walked toward the practice suites, a corridor of closed doors and muffled music. In 2C, a flutist gilded the air with eighth notes. In 3A, someone wrestled a cello into mercy. June stopped at an empty room, set her little metronome on the stand, and froze. Her hands floated where a violin should have been. We'll find one, Liam said quickly, reflex turning into plan. They'll have a loner. They returned to Jonah. Any chance of borrowing an instrument? Liam asked. Student size. Just for the slot. Jonah grimaced. The lending closets closed on weekends. Sorry. From behind them, a voice said, I have a spare. They turned. A girl of 12 stood with a violin case hanging from one shoulder, her hair braided into a crown. A woman her mother likely watched from a few steps back, hands tucked into a puffer jacket. It's a 3/4, the girl said, unclipping the latches. I keep it tuned. I'm Sophie. She held the instrument out like a gift she had already decided to give. You can use it. June blinked. Are you sure? Sophie shrugged, pleased by her own power to make a problem disappear. Someone lent me when I forgot my bow last year. It's like a rule. You give back what you got. June cradled the violin, testing its weight. The chin rest felt different, the varnish was newer. The smell was bright and woody like a cupboard that had never known winter. She drew the bow across one open string, and the note rang true. Her shoulders dropped by an inch. What's your piece? Sophie asked. June thought. Something simple, she said. Something honest. Sophie grinned. Best kind. They thanked her, and in the practice room, June stood straight and let her fingers learn the shape of this new neck. Liam set his phone metronome to a soft tick, then shut it off. No, he said. Today, we listen to your own clock. June nodded. She closed her eyes. The bow settled. Liam heard the room hush in that way. Rooms hush when someone is about to tell the truth. Play for Mom, he said, just for her. June breathed in, breathed out. On the other side of the building, Amelia Drake strode through the administrative wing in a black suit that did not apologize for success. Evan matched her pace with a tablet in one hand, lists multiplying like rabbits. The acoustics consultant can do 3, he said. The Cleveland donor moved dinner to 7. Also, facilities flagged a budget variance in the new wing, something about substrate. Later, Amelia said. Later never gets smaller. Evan replied not unkindly. Amelia's smile was brief and precise. Later owes me interest. They reached the lobby outside Drake Hall where the Youth Talent Showcase had turned Saturday into a parade of hope. Folding chairs formed tidy rows. A program on a music stand listed first names and instruments like a prayer to progress. She intended to pass through without stopping, shake hands, be seen, exit stage left to a conference room where numbers made more sense than people. Then the doors to the hall opened and a sound came out, a single, held note from somewhere near the center of the stage, the kind that doesn't show off but shows up. It hovered round and clean as if polished by breath. The people around the door turned their heads. Amelia felt the sensation she hated most, choice rearranging her bones. I'll be 5 minutes, she said to Evan, already moving. The hall was half full. On stage, a small figure in a purple hoodie stood under the soft light. No accompanist, no swagger. The girl placed the bow and did not rush. The first phrase slid into the room like a ribbon pulled from a pocket. The tempo was unhurried, the tone clear without vanity. The melody was old American, maybe mountain air in it, and the child lifted its lines with a restraint that felt like respect. Something unlatched in Amelia's chest with a quiet click. The years dissolved the way breath erases glass. Memory returned not as images first, but as method. The slight swell into the second bar, the way the bow hair kissed the string and then let go the unshowy rubato that said, I trust the song to carry itself. Beneath her ribs, grief rose and did not apologize. Play the truth, sweetheart. Notes are ink. Truth is water. Her mother's voice, again winter afternoon radiator clanking a girl whose feet didn't reach the floor, listening as if listening were a way to grow. Now this child on her stage, on Amelia's stage, was shaping sound with the same ethics. Not imitation, inheritance. Evan leaned in whispering. 3 minutes became 8. His concern was logistical, but he watched her face and softened. Should I? No. She said so quietly it might not have been a word. Let her play. The girl moved into the B section, the melody bending like a road around a slow hill. In the aisle, a panel of faculty took notes with practiced expressions encouraging neutral assessing, neutral another kind of neutral that meant someone else will make the hard call. A few parents recorded with their phones held at heart level as if deflecting bullets. Near the back, a man in a work polo stood with his hands folded so tightly it looked like he was holding himself together. The fluorescent lights carved fatigue into his face, but there was a steadiness in his posture that Amelia recognized the way swimmers recognize water. He watched the child as if the floor would open if he blinked. Amelia kept her eyes on the bow arm. The girl's wrist did something at the end of the phrase, rounded, never stiff traveling, just a whisper beyond the point where many would stop to let the last molecule of sound dimple the air before lifting. Her mother had taught that. Finish the page even if the sentence ends early. The memory was so sudden and precise that Amelia gripped the armrest to stay in the present. On stage, the final reprise returned simpler than the middle, like a person coming home with less luggage than when they left. The tone stayed true. The child didn't chase applause with volume. She let the last note be the size it needed to be, then lifted the bow and lowered her chin. Silence held. It wasn't the confused kind. It was the "we've just witnessed something honest" kind, rare and delicate. Then the applause began, small at first, then fuller palms saying, "Thank you the way people used to when gratitude wasn't curated." The panel whispered. A woman with a cloud of gray hair, Professor Hargreaves' strings, leaned toward the mic. "Thank you, June," she said, glancing at the form in front of her. "Do you study privately?" June swallowed hands still. "I practice with my dad," she said. Her voice didn't ask permission to be small. "Every day." "Who chose your piece?" Hargreaves asked. "It chose me," June said, then blushed quick and fierce as if the truth had surprised her by coming out dressed for company. A few parents smiled. The panel wrote something down. Any comments from the judges asked the moderator, doing her best not to sound bored. A younger faculty member in a narrow tie leaned forward. "Intonation, near the third position, needs attention," he said, "but your phrasing has an uncommon patience." June nodded like a student receiving homework. "Thank you," she said. "You may step down," Hargreaves said. "We'll post the program order at 1. June gave a small bow more like gratitude than custom and left the stage. In the aisle, the man in the work polo exhaled a breath he must have been holding for the length of a song. He smiled the kind of smile that makes a room feel less conditional. Amelia stood abruptly. Evan flinched. "Are you?" "I'm fine," she said. She wasn't not in any way that spreadsheets could chart. She moved to the back of the hall toward the side exit toward air. In the corridor, the world resumed its regular size. 2 teenagers argued gently about reed strengths. A mother dug for a granola bar like a magician pulling doves. Amelia pressed her palm to the cool wall and closed her eyes. That bow hand. That breath at the end of the line. That refusal to decorate grief. She didn't realize she'd spoken aloud until Evan said carefully, "What was that?" Amelia opened her eyes. Her voice came out as a thread. "It's my mother's sound." The pawn ticket burned against Liam's wallet all through Sunday morning, but it wasn't the numbers on the slip that troubled him. It was the echo of Amelia Drake's eyes in that recital hall, the way she had looked not at him, but through him, as if she had seen something impossible inside his daughter's bow arm. Monday evening, the conservatory buzzed with its usual rhythm strings rehearsing behind closed doors, laughter in the cafeteria, the squeak of sneakers along the polished gym floor. Liam pushed his cart through the east corridor, mops clattering softly. He was almost grateful for the predictability. Order was its own comfort. Then he noticed her. Amelia Drake stood near the glass trophy case alone. Not a donor entourage, not the assistant with the umbrella. Just her in a fitted charcoal coat that seemed too fine for fluorescent light. Her hands were clasped, her gaze pinned to the display of retired instruments. One, in particular, a battered violin with a cracked chin rest once played by a student prodigy in the 1950s. The placard beneath it read, "History lives in sound." She didn't turn as he approached, but her voice carried, "Do you know? The pawn shop." 3 blocks down, Liam's step faltered. "Yes," he said cautiously. "I saw you there." Her words were measured, deliberate. "With a violin." Silence stretched. The whir of the soda machine down the hall became too loud. "It belonged to my wife, Liam," said finally low and steady. "She passed 6 years ago. It's the only piece of her left." Amelia pivoted to face him, and for the first time he saw the steel crack. Just slightly, but enough. "I recognized it." Liam frowned. "Recognized it." Her eyes sharpened. "There's a mark on the lower bout. A small scratch almost like a note carved into wood. My mother's violin had the same scar. She told me once it was an accident, a slip during rehearsal, but she kept it. Said imperfection gave the instrument a soul." The air between them grew heavier. Liam felt something tug deep in his chest the way grief resurfaces when you least expect it. He remembered the night he and his wife found the instrument in a dusty music store. She had touched the scar and smiled as if the violin itself had chosen them. "It came from a shop upstate," Liam murmured. "We didn't ask for its story. We just needed one." Amelia stepped closer, her heels clicking softly on the tile. "It is a story," she said, voice trembling against her control. "My mother was Eleanor Drake. She was a soloist before cancer took her. That violin vanished after her final tour. And now, it's in your hands." Liam's throat tightened. He searched for words but found none that would stand upright. "Do you understand what that means?" Amelia pressed, almost pleading, though pride laced the edges. "That instrument is part of my family, my history, and I see it." She paused, drawing a breath, "Sharp as glass I see it in your daughter's playing." He met her eyes. For the first time he saw not the billionaire benefactor or the distant board member, but a daughter, haunted, aching, trying to rebuild a bridge to someone long gone. "I pawned it," Liam admitted, voice raw. "I had no choice." Why she asked, though her gaze suggested she already knew. Rent, groceries, things a 9-year-old shouldn't go without. He lowered his head. "I'll get it back. Somehow." Amelia's silence wasn't judgment. It was calculation, the kind born of years at negotiation tables and charity galas. But underneath, there was a pulse of something more human. Finally, she said softly, "You shouldn't have to choose between survival and music." Liam's jaw clenched. "But I do. Every day." The words hung bitter and unshakable. She looked down at her own hands, flexed her fingers as though they still remembered scales from childhood. Then, almost inaudibly, she confessed, "When I lost her, I closed the case and never opened it again. I buried the sound. Maybe that's why I've spent my life writing checks instead of listening." It was a confession she hadn't intended to make, and Liam recognized the vulnerability in it. "You still hear her," though, he said quietly. Amelia's eyes glistened. Every time someone plays with truth instead of pride. The hallway was too bright for what passed between them. Liam felt exposed, like they were standing at the edge of something neither of them had named. June didn't inherit that violin, he said, but she inherited honesty. If that's your mother's sound you're hearing, maybe it's supposed to find its way back. Amelia blinked as if steadying herself. She straightened her shoulders. The armor returned, but it was thinner now. Then, "Let's not waste the chance," she said, composed again. "Redeem the instrument. I'll see to it." Liam shook his head instinctively. "I don't want charity." Her eyes sharpened with something fiercer than disdain. "This isn't charity. It's legacy." For a moment, their gazes locked, two worlds colliding in the narrow corridor of an old conservatory. And for a heartbeat, both understood the cost of keeping music alive. Behind them, a student's laughter echoed, jarring against the fragile moment. Amelia turned, regaining her composure. "You'll hear from me soon," she said, tone clipped but softer than it had been in the pawn shop. She walked away, each step decisive, yet her hands trembled as they brushed the hem of her coat. Liam remained by the trophy case, staring at the empty space where their conversation had lived. He pulled his wallet from his pocket, unfolded the pawn ticket, and touched the faded photo of June tucked behind it. Two women, worlds apart, bound by the same violin. One, gone one, searching. And a little girl who played like both of them were listening. He closed his eyes. The scratch on the wood, the mark of a note carved into time, was no longer just a scar. It was a bridge, fragile, improbable, but real. And bridges he thought were meant to be crossed. The message reached him through ordinary channels which somehow made it feel larger. Mr. Klein found Liam in the east stairwell where a stubborn tack of gum had outlived 3 warning signs and a semester of shoes. "Mrs. Drake requested 5 minutes," Klein said, eyes on his clipboard as if reading a weather report. "Room A112. After hours." Now, Klein said, then softer. "You're good at making things shine. Don't make this messier than it is." Liam rinsed the mop, set it to dry, and wiped his hands on his work pants. A112 was one of the old listening rooms, a square with no windows and perfect acoustics that made whispers behave like truths. He paused at the door, then knocked. "Come in." Amelia stood by the record console, one hand on the tone arm, not moving it. The light above her traced a clean line along the edge of her jaw, but something in her posture had shifted since the pawn shop, a fractional unbracing. "Thank you for coming," she said. The room closed behind him with a soft click. He stayed near the door, uncertain what to do with his hands. "You said 5 minutes." "I may need 6, she said, and almost smiled at herself for saying it. She gestured to a chair. "Please." He sat, elbows on his knees. The silence felt curated, a museum of everything they hadn't yet said. "I owe you an apology," she began. "For what I said at the shop, trade music for cash. It was cruel. Wealth buys silence. It does not buy sleep. I know the difference." Liam tilted his head. Apology accepted, he said, because he had learned that accepting grace when it came was not weakness, but wisdom. She drew a breath. "When I was 9, my mother played for me in a room like this." Winter pressed its face to the window. The radiator clanked like a metronome that had lost its patience. She stopped mid-phrase and said, "Notes are ink, sweetheart. Truth is water. Find the water." He heard the long-ago voice in hers and a softness he hadn't been allowed to imagine. "Eleanor Drake," he said quietly. "I've seen the photographs." She looked like she could turn a bow into a pulse. "She could," Amelia said, and a laugh that wasn't quite laughter slipped out. "She could also burn soup and forget bills and lose 2 coats in 1 week. Cancer came like a thief who knew where we hid the spare key. After her final tour, that violin vanished. Shipping mistake. An unscrupulous dealer we never found out. I did what people with money do when mercy costs less than grief. I built buildings. I pressed my name against marble until it looked like a decision." She met his gaze. "Then your daughter stepped onto my stage and played my childhood back to me with a bow I couldn't see. When you said you'd redeemed the instrument," she stopped the smallest fracture in her voice, then recovered. "I recognized the mark on the lower bout, the little scar shaped like a note. My mother called it her reminder that perfection is a rumor." Liam swallowed. "My wife loved that scar," he said. "She said it made the violin honest." He realized he had never told anyone that sentence out loud. "What was her name?" Amelia asked. "Nora," he said, and the syllable crossed the room like a bird that knew the way home. "We met in a Bobby's diner when my car wouldn't start, and she told me it sounded like I was listening for music in an engine. Everything hums," she said. She was right about most things. He rubbed his thumb over his palm, an old habit that helped words come out straight. "We had June 2 summers later. I was doing carpentry then, union jobs, decent health insurance. The conservatory gig came after the wreck." He hadn't planned to say the word tonight, but it arrived without knocking. Amelia's posture softened by a degree you only learn to notice when you live beside grief. "Black ice," he said. "Upstate on a curve the county still hasn't banked right. The truck doing everything wrong, us doing everything right, which turns out not to matter when physics throws a tantrum. June was 3. I remember the paramedic's eyes, how gentle they were. I remember the way the ER lights made the world look like it had been erased and redrawn. He stopped. The room held him up. I took the night shift here because buildings are easiest when other people are sleeping. He went on more quietly. Less noise to compete with, and the benefits mattered and the schedule let me be at school, drop-offs and doctor visits and everything big and small. I sweep the floors that hold sonatas, then I go home and sweep crumbs from a table that holds a second grader's spelling words. It's the same motion. I hope both gleam. They were the kind of sentences that either embarrass two people or teach them trust. In A112, they did the latter. Amelia leaned her hip against the console, hands open, as if surrendering to the conversation. "I have done a ruthless thing with my grief," she said. Directed it at the world and called it philanthropy. It felt disciplined. It also kept me from hearing anything that sounded like my mother. "Your daughter undid that in 3 minutes." Liam nodded. June has a way of telling the truth with fewer words than necessary. A small silence, then Amelia's voice careful. "Let me redeem the violin." "It's not that simple," he said. "I don't want charity," she finished, not unkindly. "I heard you the first time. I'm not offering alms. I'm asking to repair a bridge. We can draft a promissory note, a loan 0 interest payable as you can. Or call it a custodial agreement. The instrument returns to your home because that is where it is played. In exchange, you allow June to present it on this stage when appropriate under my mother's name, because that is where it is heard." He studied her. The proposition was part legal, part liturgy. He tried to smile. "You negotiate like a boardroom. I negotiate like a daughter," she said, and that line landed where lines stay. He looked down at his hands at a life that had learned to carry more than it could, and then back up. "If we do this, it's because music belongs in the room where the child is practicing. And in the hall where the child is seen," she added gently. He exhaled. "Then yes, we'll write it down." Relief did not wash her face. It arrived as composure deepening, as if some internal ledger had reconciled. "Tomorrow morning, I'll meet you at Russo's at 9. We'll handle the paperwork properly. I'm very good at paperwork." He almost laughed at the formality of hope. 9, then. She reached into her bag, removed an envelope, and placed it on the console without sliding it toward him. "For the fee," she said, "you can hand it to Russo yourself." "Thank you," he said, standing, because gratitude likes to be upright. She didn't move to leave. Her eyes indexed the corners of the room the way you look for a clock that doesn't tick. "There's more," she said, like someone testing if the floor can hold the next step. "Professor Hargreaves runs a small studio on Wednesdays. Not an audition, not yet. An open lesson. Quiet. No pageantry. If June would like to sit in—" Liam felt the instinct rise to shield, to say not yet, to ask a dozen questions about gates and gatekeepers. Then he remembered the way June had lifted her bow and asked the room to be honest. "We'll come," he said. "We won't ask for special treatment." "Good," Amelia said. "We don't give it, we give attention." He nodded. "That's rarer." Amelia glanced at the turntable, finally lowering the needle. A faint crackle, then a young Eleanor Drake filled the room with the kind of tone that makes apologies unnecessary. The first few bars were enough to tell anyone who understood that she had not come here to perform. She had come to testify. "I couldn't listen for years." Amelia said so quietly he almost didn't catch it. Silence felt loyal. But silence is just another way to forget. Your daughter reminded me that grief can be tuned. Liam closed his eyes for a second. "When June asks about her mom, I don't tell her the whole story. I tell her the parts we can play. Mom taught us how to hear what's beautiful and hold on, I say. It's true enough to be true." Something softened completely, then the final hinge released. Amelia stepped forward, not closing the distance entirely, but enough to speak in a voice that belonged to no donor or board chair. "I'm sorry for what I said in the shop," she repeated. I was speaking to a version of myself I pretend I don't recognize. And I was speaking to a fear that keeps my hands in my pockets, he said. We can do better than both. They let the record play one more minute. The room felt less like a vault and more like a chapel nobody had warded with dogma. When the phrase ended, Amelia lifted the needle with the same care she would have used for a question she wasn't finished asking. Tomorrow at 9, she said. Tomorrow he returned. As he reached for the door, she added, Liam. He turned. The way she stood on that stage. That's not an accident. Make sure the world doesn't teach her to apologize for it. He nodded. I won't let it. The hall outside smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and winter air tucked into coats. He walked back toward his cart, past the letters of her name in brushed steel, past his reflection warped in the D. He slid his wallet out, checked the pawn ticket as if the date might have changed while he wasn't looking, then tucked it back behind June's drawing, 2 figures under a stage light bows like halos. In A112, Amelia remained alone for a moment, the silent record spinning under a lifted needle. She pressed her palms against the console, breathing as if learning how again. Notes are ink, she whispered to the room that had kept her secret. Truth is water. Outside the conservatory exhaled the day. Somewhere down the corridor a student laughed. Somewhere beyond the glass the city rehearsed its tireless hymn. And 2 people from opposite sides of a river neither had named agreed to build a bridge wide enough for a child to cross. Wednesday evening arrived with the kind of chill that made the conservatory's marble floors feel like ice beneath the soles. Liam walked alongside June through the grand corridor their reflections caught in the tall glass panes. For June, each echoing step was a drumbeat of nerves. For Liam, each was a prayer he couldn't quite phrase. Professor Hargreaves' studio was tucked at the end of the west wing, a modest room despite the weight of reputation behind its door. When they entered, Amelia was already there, speaking with the professor in a tone that was polite but sharp, the way glass is sharp even when it glitters. Thank you for allowing this, Amelia said. It's not an audition, just a window. Professor Hargreaves adjusted her glasses, gray curls haloing her stern face. She turned toward June, who clutched the violin case Amelia had helped redeem that very morning. Play what you know, she instructed simply. Liam knelt by his daughter, fixing her ribbon as though it could anchor her courage. Just play for Mom, he whispered. June nodded, shoulders squared, and stepped forward. The first notes filled the room, fragile at first, then steadier, as though each bow stroke reminded her she belonged. The violin, restored and resonant, carried tones both bright and mournful like 2 voices braided together. For a moment, the professor's stern eyes softened. But when June finished, the silence broke with skepticism. One of the younger instructors in the back, a man with neatly pressed sleeves and an expression that spoke of pedigree, cleared his throat. She has natural phrasing, but raw. Technique uneven. Students usually spend years mastering fundamentals before touching this repertoire. Liam bristled. She practices every day. Discipline isn't what she lacks. The man arched a brow. Perhaps, but we must be careful. The conservatory isn't a place for sentiment. We cultivate excellence, not charity cases. The words landed like a stone in Liam's chest. His grip on the chair tightened until his knuckles whitened. June's eyes flickered toward him uncertain, but he forced a steady smile for her sake. Amelia's voice cut through the room, clear, commanding. This child doesn't need charity. She needs recognition. What you heard wasn't sentiment, it was truth. And if you think the conservatory is only about Polish, then perhaps you've forgotten why music exists at all. The young instructor flushed, muttering something about standards, but Amelia didn't let go. She stepped closer to the panel, her heels striking the floor like punctuation. Do you know why my mother became a legend? Not because every note was perfect, because every note was alive. And today this child carried that same flame. Professor Hargreaves raised a hand, silencing the tension. Enough. We're not here to quarrel. She looked at June, her voice gentler now. "Child, what is music to you?" June blinked, fingers tightening on the bow. "Music is Mom's voice," she said softly. "When I play, I feel like she's not gone, like she's telling me to be brave, even when it's hard." The room stilled. Even the skeptical instructor shifted uncomfortably, his argument stripped bare against a 9-year-old's honesty. Professor Hargreaves' eyes glistened. She nodded once. "Come back next week. Same time." June's lips parted in surprise. Liam exhaled relief, washing through him like light after storm clouds. As they gathered their things, Amelia leaned toward Liam. "You see, bridges can hold more weight than you think." But Liam shook his head. "That bridge won't stay steady if they see her as a janitor's daughter before they see her as a musician." Amelia regarded him with a seriousness that felt almost tender. "Then let them see me standing beside her." "Beside you. If my name opens the door, fine, but once the door is open, she will show them who she is." Liam hesitated. Pride and gratitude wrestled inside him. He wanted June's path to be hers unassisted. Yet he knew doors in this city were guarded by locks money alone could open. He met Amelia's eyes and found not pity there, but resolve. "Why?" he asked quietly. "Why help us?" For once, Amelia didn't mask the tremor in her tone. "Because I've lived too long in silence. And your daughter reminded me that silence is just another kind of death. I won't let her music be buried the way my mother's was." It was the closest thing to a confession he had ever heard from her. And it was enough. Later that night, in the janitor's lounge, Diego dropped into a chair beside Liam. "Word is, the board's buzzing. Some faculty aren't thrilled that Ms. Drake's pet project comes with a mop bucket attached." Liam tensed. "They're already talking man in this building." "They were talking before you walked in." Diego clapped a hand on his shoulder. "Just remember, noise doesn't break you. You've lived through worse." Liam stared at his calloused hands, then at the violin case resting beside his chair. He thought of June's steady bow, of Amelia's defiance, of the way the room had hushed when his daughter named music as her mother's voice. "I won't let them take this from her," he said firmly. Diego grinned. "There's the stubborn janitor I know." At the same hour, Amelia stood at her penthouse window, city lights flickering below. Her reflection stared back, polished, untouchable, but she no longer believed in that armor. Her mother's voice echoed in memory. "Notes are ink. Truth is water." Tonight, a child had spoken truth in a room full of skeptics, and Amelia had realized something for the first time in years. She wasn't just a benefactor to music. She was its witness. She pressed a hand against the glass as if testing its strength. "We'll keep the bridge standing," she whispered. And for the first time, her voice trembled with hope instead of control. The call came just after sunrise while pancake steam filled the kitchen. "This is Professor Hargreaves," the voice said, calm and precise. "We'd like June Carter to perform a solo at Saturday's conservatory fundraiser matinee. Noon. Drake Hall." Liam's grip on the phone tightened. He turned to June, barefoot, blue ribbon already in her hair syrup shining on her cheeks, and mouthed, "They chose you." June covered her mouth, eyes wide. Then came a laugh, tangled with a gasp. "Me." "On the big stage." "On the big stage," Hargreaves confirmed. "Bring your honesty." When the line went silent, the kitchen suddenly felt like church. By midweek, the conservatory was buzzing with rehearsals, floral deliveries, and the nervous calm of people pretending not to be nervous. Drake Hall itself pulsed with energy, stage lights, tested programs, stacked polished wood, glowing. June stood center stage in her navy dress sneakers, peeking beneath the hembow raised. Liam hovered in the back row with his part janitor, part bodyguard. "Again, please," Hargreaves called. "Measure 22 to the end." June played. The notes came steady, unforced, carrying the weight of something far beyond her years. Two instructors whispered a few rows down. One crossed his arms. "She's not conservatory trained. If this falls apart, it reflects badly." Diego passing with a coil of tape cut in. "What I hear is a kid who can play. That's rarer than a polished resume." The critic shrank back. Then Amelia slipped quietly into the back row beside Liam. No entourage, no heels echoing. Just presence. She watched her breathing syncing with the rhythm of June's bow. "She belongs there," she whispered. Liam's jaw set. "Some rooms test you before they accept you." "Then we make the room listen," Amelia said simply. Hargreaves shut her folder. "Good for today. Keep the middle section like a secret the room deserves." "Yes, ma'am," June replied, voice steady, chin lifted. The hall emptied slowly. Liam wheeled his cart aside to grab a coffee cup someone had left in the aisle. When he returned, June was frozen in place, bow mid-air. "Dad," she whispered. It snapped. The E string hung loose, not stretched and broken, but cut clean like someone meant it. Liam's chest tightened. He crouched. "Did it break while tuning?" June shook her head. "I was about to play. Then it just dropped." Her lip trembled. It sounded like a little bird hitting a window. Liam took the violin, gently turning it in the light. Too clean. Too deliberate. Amelia stepped forward, eyes narrowing as she examined the break without touching it. Her voice was firm. "Evan," she called. Her assistant appeared at once. "Ask security to pull footage from the last 10 minutes. Quietly." Evan nodded and slipped out. Hargreaves joined them. "Strings do snap," she said, but her frown told another story. "We have spares at home," Liam said. He touched June's shoulder. "We'll fix it." June swallowed hard, then straightened. "If they cut one string," she said, voice firmer now, "I'll play with the whole violin." Amelia crouched to June's eye level, her tone softer but steady. "If someone tries to stop you, play louder for them." June nodded, a flash of fire in her small frame. The blue ribbon held tight. Back home, Liam cleared the kitchen table and laid the violin on a folded towel. He washed and dried his hands as if entering surgery. "Okay," he said gently. "Let's bring her voice back." June hovered close, watching. He removed the broken string, uncoiled it carefully, then opened the paper packet with the new E. "Always start with the bead," he explained. Seated in the fine tuner, hear that click, June leaned in, like a tiny yes. He smiled. Exactly. He guided the string through the peg hole, winding slowly. We turned toward the scroll, neat coils. No rushing. Let the string learn. June held the shoulder rest like it was fragile glass. "Is it scared?" maybe Liam said. "So we show it, we're not." When the string settled, Liam nodded. "Try it." June lifted the bow and played a scale. The sound wavered, then steadied soft at first, then stronger as if the violin had taken a breath. She grinned. "See? It works." Liam exhaled. The tightness in his chest eased. "Again from measure 22, she asked. He chuckled. "As many times as it takes." They practiced until the lamplight grew heavy. June's laughter mixed with the notes. By the time she set the bow down, the kitchen felt bigger, as if hope itself had stretched the walls. Later that night, Amelia sat at her penthouse desk while Evan placed a tablet in front of her. Security footage played students walking past a stagehand with cables, two professors exchanging notes. At one point, a figure lingered near the stage wings, but the angle was poor, the face hidden. Nothing conclusive. Evan cleared his throat. Could have been an accident. A stagehand brushing the tuner, maybe. Or someone careless, Amelia said quietly. She closed the tablet. "File it. Add extra checks tomorrow. No fuss." "Yes, Miss Drake." Alone again, she stared out at the city lights. Somewhere below, a father was teaching his daughter resilience with nothing more than strings and patience. And the image of that little girl refusing to back down stayed with her longer than she expected. Before dawn, Liam checked the violin one last time. The E string held. He left a card on the kitchen table in his square handwriting, measure 22. "Don't lean. Let it lean on you." Beside it, he placed the pawn ticket stamped redeemed, no longer a threat, but a reminder. He whispered into the quiet apartment, "We'll make it sing." And somewhere even in the shadows the music was already beginning. Saturday night arrived with all the weight of expectation. Drake Hall glowed under chandeliers so bright they seemed determined to outshine the nervous hearts waiting in the wings. Rows of velvet seats filled with donors, professors, and board members. The air smelled faintly of lilies and polished wood. Backstage, Liam bent down to fix the blue ribbon in June's hair, the ribbon she always saved for days that needed courage. She clutched the violin case against her chest. "Breathe with me," he whispered. 4 in, 4 out, like waves. Her chest rose and fell. She stared at the crack of light between the curtains. "You're not playing for them," Liam reminded softly. "You're playing for Mom. And for you." A stagehand poked his head in. "Soloist number 6, be ready. 2 minutes." June's voice was a whisper. "Dad? What if I forget?" "You won't," Liam said, steady, even though his stomach was in knots. "And if you do, just keep going. Even silence can carry you." June nodded, her chin firming. Amelia Drake sat alone in the front row. No entourage, no polished mask tonight. She wanted to see the little girl's hands with her own eyes. Her assistant, Evan, waited discreetly near the aisle, eyes scanning the hall. The program moved along, a pianist with quick fingers, a flutist, so precise the notes seemed drilled into air. Applause came politely, never rising beyond what was expected. Then the moderator leaned toward the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome June Carter." The room hushed. June stepped into the light, small in her navy dress sneakers, just peeking out beneath the hem. She bowed, simply tucked the violin under her chin and lifted the bow. The speakers hissed, crackled, then went dead. No sound. A ripple of voices spread through the crowd. A woman fanned herself with the program and stopped mid-motion. A man in a suit glanced at his watch, frowned, then forgot to lower his hand. Whispered complaints scattered like static. Backstage, Liam's whole body tensed. His instinct screamed to run out and save her. But then he caught her eyes. She wasn't moving, but she wasn't running either. Her small shoulders squared as if she'd made a choice. He mouthed the words, "Play for Mom." June took a breath. She lowered the bow to the strings. And she played. The first note rose into the silence, thin but clear. At first it sounded too small for the giant room, but Drake Hall was built for music. The sound carried not booming, but steady like a single candle lit in a dark room. The whispers stopped. People leaned forward in their seats. A woman in the balcony lowered her opera glasses. The skeptical instructor's pen froze above his paper. June's bow moved with calm focus. The melody wasn't loud, but it reached every corner. Each note carried something more than practice. It carried longing, courage, and the stubborn heart of a 9-year-old refusing to quit. Amelia's throat tightened. For a moment, she heard her mother's playing in that child's sound, then realized it wasn't her mother at all. It was June finding her own voice through the same wood and strings. Backstage, Liam pressed his fist to his mouth, his eyes wet. He had promised Nora he'd raise their daughter strong. Tonight, June was proving him right. At the middle section, the one Professor Hargreaves told her to play like a secret, June's bow softened. Her sound thinned but didn't break. It quivered, then steadied. The audience leaned closer, breath held as though they were listening for something only she could reveal. By the time she reached the final phrase, the hall wasn't just listening, it was waiting. When the last note hung in the air, June let it fade naturally until the room fell into complete stillness. And then the silence broke. Applause thundered through the hall. Not polite claps, but a surge of hands crashing together. People rose to their feet. Some wiped their eyes. The man who had been checking his watch clapped the hardest. The woman with the fan pressed it to her chest. June bowed again. Her cheeks flushed, her eyes bright with tears she refused to hide. Liam whispered toward the space where Nora should have been. She did it, love. She made them hear. Amelia stood with the rest, but her claps came slower, each one deliberate. Her eyes never left the girl on stage. Backstage, June stumbled into her father's arms, trembling. "I was scared," she admitted into his chest. "So was I," Liam said, kissing her hair. "But fear just means it mattered." Did Mom hear me? She heard every note he said firmly. So did everyone else. Amelia's voice came softly from the curtain. So did I. They turned. She stepped forward, her face unguarded for the first time. Her eyes were red, but her voice was gentle. "June," she said, crouching so they were level. "You made the whole room listen. That wasn't just music. That was you." June smiled shyly and hugged the violin close. For a long moment, Amelia looked at Liam. No words passed, but something shifted, an acknowledgement that what had just happened was bigger than music, bigger than pride. It was trust. And it was the start of a bridge they might finally cross together. For a second, after June's final note faded, the hall went so quiet it felt like even the air was listening. Then the applause returned, not polite this time, but fierce and heartfelt. Feet stomped, hands stung. A child in the back clapped so wildly her program slipped to the floor. June blinked into the light cheeks' wet violin still under her chin. She bowed once more. Encore. A voice called from the balcony. Professor Hargreaves lifted her brows at the moderator, then at Liam in the wings. Liam pressed 2 fingers to his chest and gave June a nod. June tightened her grip on the bow, stepped back to center stage, and lifted her violin again. She chose something simple, an old American folk tune, plain, steady, the kind of melody that slips into your bones without asking. She didn't dress it up. She just played it bow hand, calm, left hand, sure. The tune filled the room like soup steam on a winter night, ordinary but warming. This time, the audience leaned in. A woman in the back row stopped fanning herself. A man who had checked his watch earlier let his arm fall to his side. A student standing in the doorway clapped softly just for himself, as if saving the sound for later. Amelia felt her chest ache. The way June curved the ends of her phrases, it was how her own mother used to play. For a moment, Amelia was a girl again, sitting on a stool too high for her feet, watching Eleanor Drake pull truth out of wood and horsehair. Tears slid down her cheeks before she could stop them. By the aisle, Evan, usually stone-faced, turned away pretending to check his tablet. Later, when someone asked why he had stayed with Amelia so long, he would think of this night and of his mother's piano, how Amelia once donated an upright to the community center where his mother taught. She had believed then that music could outlast hardship. Tonight proved her right. Diego, leaning near the exit with his coil of tape, swallowed hard. Years ago, when Liam lost Nora, Diego had been the one to stand outside his door every night just to make sure the lights came on. Now, watching June, he whispered to himself, "I saw you stand back up, brother. She's got that from you." At the judges' table, the skeptical instructor lowered his pen. His jaw clenched as June played through the last phrase. He couldn't deny it anymore. This wasn't charity. It was talent. Real, undeniable talent. When the encore ended, the ovation came again, bigger, louder. The hall stood to its feet. June bowed, small and brave. Backstage, she walked straight into her father's arms. Liam knelt, holding her tight. "You let the silence carry you," he whispered. "I heard Mom," June said softly. "So did I," Liam replied, voice breaking. A voice came from behind them. "So did I." It was Amelia. She stepped forward, no mask of wealth or distance left. She bent down so her eyes met June's. "June," she said, her voice raw but kind. "You made the whole room listen. That wasn't just music. That was you." June smiled shyly. "I just played what the song wanted. That's rarer than you think," Amelia said. Professor Hargreaves approached her, eyes bright. "You played without fear," she told June. "That's the hardest thing to teach." Then, to everyone's surprise, the skeptical instructor extended his hand to Liam. His voice shook but held steady. "I was wrong. She's not just talented, she's extraordinary. I'm sorry." Liam clasped his hand firmly. Apology accepted. In the green room, donors mingled by the cheese platters. Word of June's performance had spread faster than programs. When she walked in, conversations stilled, then softened into respectful murmurs. A cafeteria worker in her apron stepped forward, a cookie wrapped in a napkin in her hand. She pressed it into June's palm. "My mama used to say food tastes better with music in the room. You reminded me of her tonight." June grinned. "Then I hope this makes the cookie taste sweeter." The woman laughed through tears and squeezed her hand. Nearby, Evan leaned close to Amelia. Security reviewed the footage. He murmured. No clear face. Just a quick hand near the case. Could have been carelessness. Or not. Amelia's jaw tightened. Then she shook her head. Not tonight. Tonight belongs to her. June carried her violin to a side table. Liam opened the case, letting the wood breathe. The scar on its lower bout caught the light. Amelia's hand hovered over it, not touching. Perfection is a rumor, she whispered. Truth is water, Liam said quietly. Their eyes met, and for the first time they both believed it. June hugged the violin close. Her voice was steady, simple. 2 moms heard me tonight. Mom, and your mom. The adults froze, breath caught. What did they say? Liam asked gently. June thought for a moment. Mom said, breathe like you're saying yes. And the other mom said, finish the page even if the sentence ends early. She looked down, embarrassed. I know that sounds silly. Amelia dropped to one knee and touched her hand. Sweetheart, that doesn't sound silly at all. That sounds like them. Later, when Drake Hall emptied, Amelia offered softly. Want to sit in the hall while it's quiet? Some rooms tell secrets only then. June's eyes widened. Can Dad come too? Of course, Amelia said. 10 minutes later, the 3 of them sat on the edge of the stage. The hall was empty, but still seemed to hum with memory. June plucked a string and listened to the echo. It says, thank you, she announced with a smile. Liam chuckled. Then let's say you're welcome. They sat there together, Janitor CEO and a 9-year-old girl with a blue ribbon, their shoulders nearly touching. For once, they weren't divided by walls of money or loss. They were just 3 people bound by the sound of a violin and the memory of 2 mothers who would never be forgotten. When they finally rose to leave, June turned back and waved at the empty seats as if waving to both mothers. The hall seemed to hold its breath one last time, then let it out like a sigh of blessing. The morning after, the fundraiser sunlight slanted across the conservatory courtyard, gilding the stone archways and thawing the night's frost. Liam pushed his mop bucket through the East Hall as he always did, but something in the rhythm of his steps had changed. Heads turned as he passed faculty members nodding, students whispering, janitors clapping him on the back. June's performance had spread through the conservatory like a hymn, and it was no longer possible for anyone to pretend she was simply the janitor's kid. That afternoon, a special board meeting convened in the vaulted chamber that usually smelled of varnish and polish. Amelia Drake stood at the head of the long mahogany table, no entourage, no papers in hand. She didn't need them. We are here, she began, voice steady because last night proved something we claim to believe but often forget. Music is not pedigree. Music is not privilege. It is truth, and truth can be spoken by anyone brave enough to lift their voice. A trustee leaned back, skeptical. Ms. Drake, we can all agree the child's performance was impressive. But the conservatory maintains standards. Amelia cut him off, gently but firmly. Standards are nothing without heart. You saw what I saw. That girl did not beg for a place. She proved she already belonged. Professor Hargreaves folded her hands. Miss Carter played with honesty. That is the highest standard of all. The skeptical young instructor shifted in his chair, finally speaking. She made me eat my own words. And I'm grateful. A ripple of surprise moved around the table. Amelia let the silence do its work before speaking again. June Carter will receive a full scholarship here at the conservatory, she announced. And not as a charity case. She has earned it. A murmur swept the room. The trustee who had objected cleared his throat but found no argument that survived the memory of last night's silence. And as for her father, Amelia continued her gaze sweeping toward Liam, who sat at the far end, visibly uncomfortable in a borrowed tie. We owe him more than a mop. He has kept this building alive through his labor and his loyalty. From this day forward, Liam Carter will serve as facilities manager because stewardship deserves recognition. The room stilled. Liam blinked, stunned. He opened his mouth, but words tangled. "I'm not." "Yes, you are," Amelia interrupted softly. "You are exactly the man for the job. Last night wasn't only June's redemption, it was yours and mine." For a long moment, the chamber was filled with something rarer than applause consensus born of truth. One by one, board members nodded. It was decided. That evening, Drake Hall was empty except for 3 people. Liam stood center stage, awkward in his work boots on the polished wood. June skipped around, bow in hand, still riding the high of her triumph. And Amelia sat in the front row posture, relaxed for perhaps the first time in years. "Feels different when it's empty," Liam said, voice echoing softly. June stopped, tilted her head. "It sounds like the walls are breathing." Amelia smiled faintly. "They are. Last night gave them lungs again." Liam rested a hand on the violin case, tracing the scar shaped like a note. This little mark carried 2 mothers' voices across time. "I think it's what saved us all." Amelia's eyes shimmered. "It reminded me that perfection is a rumor, and silence is not loyalty, it's loss." She rose from her seat and walked slowly toward them. "Your daughter's music gave me back my mother, and your courage, Liam, gave me back myself." He looked at her, really looked beyond the armor of wealth and the walls of pride. She was stunningly beautiful, yes, but more than that, she was human, fragile in her strength. He felt something shift and ache that was no longer just grief, but possibility. "You believed in her when others didn't," he said quietly. Amelia met his gaze unflinching. "No, I recognized her. You believed. You always did." June climbed onto a chair and raised her bow. "Play with me, Daddy." "I don't know the notes," Liam chuckled. "Then hum," she said, grinning. So he hummed low and rough while June played a simple melody, and Amelia closed her eyes to listen. For the first time, the stage didn't belong to donors or critics or ghosts. It belonged to them, a single father, a little girl, and a woman rediscovering her heart. When the last note faded, silence lingered, not empty but full, like a promise. Amelia opened her eyes, her voice soft but certain. "Let's not waste this. Together we can build something that outlives us all." Liam nodded slowly. "A bridge." "No," Amelia said, glancing at June with a tender smile. "A symphony." And for once, Liam didn't argue. As they left the hall hand in hand, June, skipping between them, the city outside hummed with ordinary life. But inside their hearts, something extraordinary had begun. The janitor was no longer invisible. The heiress was no longer untouchable. And the little girl with the violin had stitched 2 broken worlds into one rising song. Redemption had not just been found, it had been shared. 1 year later, the city had softened around them in ways none of them could have predicted. Winter had come and gone, spring had laid its green hand on the conservatory gardens, and summer had warmed the stone steps where students practiced scales in the open air. By autumn, change no longer felt like a visitor, it felt like a resident. The Carter apartment had grown richer, not with possessions but with moments. June's violin case leaned proudly in the corner, now joined by a second smaller stand for sheet music. The kitchen table was still chipped, but it had become a workshop of both homework and song. Liam's hands, once calloused by mops and carpentry, now bore the gentler lines of paperwork, budgets, and responsibility. He wore his new title, Facilities Manager, with quiet pride. His work shirt still smelled faintly of polish, but when people passed him in the halls, they didn't look away anymore. They greeted him by name. And then there was Amelia. She hadn't simply returned to the conservatory as its patron. She had stepped into its very bloodstream. She walked the corridors not just as a benefactor but as someone who had remembered her own humanity. She spoke with students, sat through rehearsals, and carried fewer walls around her heart. Somewhere along the way, her smile had lost its sharpness. It had become something warmer, slower, the kind of smile that settled into a room instead of cutting through it. The day of the anniversary fundraiser arrived crisp and golden. Drake Hall dressed again in velvet, and light carried the hum of anticipation. But this time, it wasn't about donors counting their influence. It was about something larger. A banner stretched across the atrium, its lettering bold, "The Two Mothers Symphony Foundation." The foundation was Liam and Amelia's joint creation, a scholarship fund dedicated to giving children without means the chance to study music. The name had been June's idea. "Because both our moms helped," she had said, "even if they couldn't be here." Now in the foyer, families stood in their Sunday best clutching applications, children holding instruments that had survived attics and pawn shops. The air carried the hopeful buzz of futures not yet written. Backstage, June tightened the ribbon in her hair. She was taller now, surer in her movements, though her eyes still carried the same wonder. Liam crouched to her level. Nervous. "A little," she admitted. He brushed her cheek with his thumb. "Good. Nervous means you care. Remember, you're not playing to prove anything. You're playing to give." Amelia appeared then, stunningly beautiful in a dress the color of twilight. She knelt beside June, her voice gentle. "Do you know what tonight is?" June grinned. "A thank you." "That's right," Amelia said. "A thank you to the women who gave us their music, and to the little girl who carried it forward." June hugged her fiercely, and for once, Amelia didn't hold back. She hugged with both arms like someone who had remembered how. The lights dimmed. The audience hushed. June walked onto the stage, her violin glinting beneath the chandeliers. Liam and Amelia sat side by side in the front row, hands folded, not touching, but close enough that the space between them felt intentional, alive with possibility. June lifted the violin to her chin and began. The melody was new, composed by June herself over months of quiet practice. It was simple, but it carried echoes, phrases that nodded toward Eleanor Drake's old concertos, motifs that whispered of Nora Carter's lullabies. Two mothers, two legacies stitched into one child's voice. The hall listened. The walls, already seasoned by history, seemed to lean closer. Each note was a thread weaving time together, a declaration that loss could give birth to beauty. Halfway through, Liam closed his eyes. He could almost hear Nora humming along. He felt her presence not as absence, but as continuation. Beside him, Amelia's tears fell freely, unashamed. She heard her mother in the swell of June's phrasing, the bow lingering just a moment too long, on the high note exactly as Eleanor once had. When June reached the final passage, the hall seemed to breathe with her. She let the last note hover, then resolve not into silence but into stillness so complete it felt holy. Applause erupted, thunderous and unrestrained. People rose to their feet, clapping until their palms ached, until the air vibrated with gratitude. June bowed deeply, then gestured toward her father and Amelia. The spotlight followed her hand, catching them both. The audience turned their ovation, swelling louder. Liam looked down embarrassed, but Amelia placed her hand over his. He didn't pull away. Together they stood. The ovation was no longer just for a child's performance. It was for a family, unexpected, improbable, but real. Later that night, when the hall was empty and the last program had been swept from the aisles, the three of them remained. June sat cross-legged on the stage, violin resting beside her. Liam leaned back against the piano, exhaustion softened by pride. Amelia walked slowly down the center aisle, then returned to sit with them on the wooden boards. "The city will forget tonight's speeches," Amelia said quietly, "but it won't forget the sound." Liam nodded. Truth sticks longer than words. June lay back, staring up at the rafters. "Do you think Mom and Grandma heard it?" Neither adult hesitated. "Yes," Liam said. "Absolutely," Amelia added. The child smiled. "Then we did what we came for." They sat in silence, letting the room hold the memory. The scarred violin lay between them, the faint mark on its wood catching the light like a signature. It wasn't just an instrument anymore. It was a bridge. Amelia reached out and laced her fingers with Liam's. This time, he didn't look away. He met her gaze, ruggedly handsome in the low light, and she, stunningly beautiful even with tear stains, smiled at him as if to say, "We've built something worth keeping." The three of them stayed like that until the janitorial lights flickered, the building signaling the end of another night. But for Liam, Amelia, and June, it felt less like an ending, and more like the first movement of a new symphony. When they finally stepped out into the cool night air, the city stretched around them, honking taxis, glowing billboards, laughter spilling from late-night diners. Ordinary life, unremarkable to most. But to them, it was extraordinary. Because they carried with them a violin that had outlived grief, a little girl who had turned silence into music, and two adults who had found in each other not perfection, but healing. Hand in hand, they walked into the city's song. And above the noise, if you listened closely, you could almost hear two voices, two mothers, proud and everlasting, humming along. And so, that is the story of the repossessed violin, a journey of loss, redemption, and the healing power of music that binds hearts across generations. But now, dear listener, I want to turn to you. Where are you joining us from tonight? Are you listening from a quiet town, a bustling city, or maybe somewhere far across the ocean? Share your place in the comments below. I'd love to see where this story has reached. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us keep creating these heartfelt tales, reminding us all that love, kindness, and hope are never lost. Thank you for spending your precious time with me, for listening all the way through, and for letting this story live in your heart. Until next time, may you carry its music with you wherever you go.